Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the ACOLYTE episode 4. This show is dropping some pretty big hints that Qimir is secretly the master, and we're going to go over all those clues as we go through this video. So guys, thank you for clicking this video and supporting our channel, and don't forget to have a look at the new merch that we designed ourselves at our merch store, like this Anakin Kills Sand shirt, the Hello There, Somehow Palpatine Returned, Original Trilogy, and many more. The link is below.
This is where the fun begins.
So, we begin on the forested planet of Khofar, and the subtitle font identifying these worlds is the same one that was used to identify different planets in the movie Rogue One. Nice little bit of Star Wars continuity for you there. Also, this sound was also used on the forest moon of Endor in Return of the Jedi. And then we go to the Jedi hermit Kalnaka.
Yeah, why is he living all by himself? Is he cranky and mean like that guy next door?
Yeah, that guy next door is the worst, but we don't actually know the exact reason why he's living alone, only that something deeply traumatic happened to him on Brendok that involved him and Torben. Now, during the High Republic era, when this show is set, Jedi were allowed to become way seekers, which meant that they could follow the will of the Force and not the whims of the Jedi Council. I think that's what's happening here with Kalnaka. After whatever happened on Brendok, both he and Torben had deep emotional and physical scars. Now, I gotta say, this show is actually drawing a lot of lore from the first 5 issues of the 2017 Darth Vader comic. I did mention this like in our first breakdown video, but after rereading those comics, I feel like I should go back and explain what happens in them so you can have a better understanding of what's actually occurring in this show. You see, Vader's first mission when he was in his new suit was to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Then he would take the Kyber crystal from the saber, bleed it, turn red, and then forge his own new lightsaber. And this is exactly the kind of mission that May is on in this show, to kill a Jedi without use of a weapon, to steal their lightsaber and take the crystal for herself. So this Jedi that Vader fights is named Karak-Infila. Now, during the High Republic era, he was a warrior who fought against the Nihil, but then he became so consumed with violence and combat that he actually took a step away from the Order to take what's called the Barash Vow. Now, the Barash Vow is basically a promise to separate yourself from the Order until you atone for your crimes. And in episode 2, we see that Torben took this same vow, which is why he was willing to drink the poison in that episode. Both Torben and Karak-Infila were even introduced the same way, by hovering during their meditation. And guys, this Vader comic's actually pretty great, and I highly recommend it. It also shows Anakin's final temptation to the light, and then when he fully embraces the identity of Darth Vader. And that's what I really love about this show. It shows us how hard the Jedi and the Sith have to work to use the Force well. It kind of makes me want to learn more things in my own life. Like, for instance, Doug, what are you going to do this weekend?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. I thought I might lay in a puddle.
You can't spend all summer in a puddle. You have to use your free time wisely. You know, make a summer resolution. Do some summer learning with Skillshare. They're the sponsor of this video.
Now, what does a Skillshare do?
Well, dude, actually, Skillshare changed my life. See, they have thousands of classes on film, art, business, podcasting, writing, and the stock market. Thanks to stock market classes I took on Skillshare, I learned how to invest my money right, and now I am building a steady stock portfolio. But now, my summer resolution is to finally get my novel out there.
You wrote a novel?
I did, but frankly, it needs a lot of work, so I'm taking novel writing classes on Skillshare to help me figure out what's working and what I need to cut. And then there are classes on how to get my novel published or how to self-publish. And that is what I love about Skillshare. They have classes in so many things that I've always wanted to learn, like dance or playing an instrument. And we're also starting up ScreenCrush podcast soon, and I learned how to do podcasting from Skillshare classes. Most importantly, Skillshare removes the idea that you just can't do something. Not only are there thousands of classes to help you learn, but there are no ads. And this helps you to stay focused on following your own creative voice. So our first 500 subscribers who click the link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare when you use our code. I highly recommend you try this out because it is the perfect way to learn new skills. So back to Kalnaka. We see him living that hermit life and drawing this same yin-yang symbol that we saw on the mother's head in the Brendok Coven. Now, in our episode 3 breakdown video, we talked about how this symbol looked like a yin-yang, showing how the light and dark side of the Force are meant to live in balance. This same philosophy was also reflected in the mosaic of the Prime Jedi on Acto that we saw in The Last Jedi. So in episode 3, we saw the mother briefly use the dark side to possess Torben, and I'm gonna bet that she did the same thing to Kalnaka, and he is still feeling the effects from this. In fact, we we have a video coming out really soon about how we see Cal Naka and Torben fight in the trailer, and how this one clip could be a major clue about the Master's real identity. Now, Kanaka is also drawing the symbol that is on May's head. So I'm also wondering if May and Osha are somehow making the Force out of balance. Maybe since Osha never received her own mark, it meant that the Force was somehow now tilting toward the dark side, and this imbalance, plus the mother being inside of his head, drove Cal Naka just a little bit insane. Also, a couple episodes ago, I said it looked like the ship was wedged in the roots of a tree, and now it's pretty clear that it's actually just wedged between two trees. Cal Naka probably landed it like this on purpose, and then he disabled his ship so the tree would slowly overgrow it, trapping him here. Now, we've seen this kind of give up, I'm done attitude from the Jedi before.
I came to this island to die.
Then we circle wipe to Coruscant, where the Jedi Temple has these gold-tipped towers, emblematic of the High Republic's golden robes. And of course, we see these same gold-tipped towers on the temple in the Jedi Adventures cartoon. The Padawans are training with wooden bakken, or Japanese training swords, as the teacher says.
Maximize your defenses without need to strike.
Now, this is, of course, similar to Yoda's first lesson to Luke.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense.
We also saw this reflected in Solon and Dara's fighting styles, as they both work to redirect the energy of May's attacks. And a bakken is the perfect weapon for this lesson. It's useless as an offensive weapon, but it can teach you the different forms to redirect attacks from your enemy.
Okay, so wait, if the Padawans are using little wooden sticks, well, why did the little Jedis use laser swords in Attack of the Clones?
My guess is those laser swords were low power, so they couldn't actually cut anything. They could just absorb lasers from the drones. And I would guess that Yoda just handed them out to keep these kids entertained in the last 5 minutes of class. And then we focus on Daphne Keen's character, Jecki Lon. Now, she is a Thelan human hybrid. I probably would have caught that before, but Thelans usually have blue skin, so I totally missed that she was half human, half Thelan. Now, Jackie is a very play-it-by-the-book Padawan, and I think we're going to see a lot of the series unfold through her eyes. She will discover what the Jedi did on Brendok, and I think it's going to shake her faith in the Order. You never know, by the end of the show, she might end up becoming the new Sith apprentice.
That's usually my line, but whatever.
I also think Osha probably looks at her life and feels a little bit jealous. I mean, Jecki is living the life that Osha wanted. She is learning to be a Jedi and studying under Master Soul. That's exactly what Osha tried to do before she washed out of the Jedi Order. And then we go to May on Khofar. Now, a few days ago, we put out a video where a friend of the channel, Mike Mazzella, theorized that May and Osha are actually the same person, and that we are seeing a kind of Fight Club thing going on with Osha using Force projection like Luke did in The Last Jedi. It's a really bonkers theory, but Mike was really convincing. You really should check out that video. It's very cool. The thing is, as I'm watching this episode, I can't get that theory out of my head. There's different points where you think, yeah, it would totally make sense if May or Osha was force projecting the other version of themselves. But again, more hints on that later on. Now, I did notice how certain things from the flashback episode keep recurring in this episode. Like, for instance, how Osha and May are ultimately divided by a broken bridge. But here, May crosses a similar bridge with Qimir. It's like saying that her link to her sister was severed, but now that she knows Osha is alive, she wants to reform their bond. And then we see Jedi in a tactical situation room similar to the rooms that we saw in the Clone Wars, except in the Clone Wars, these rooms were always very dark, a subtle indication that the Jedi were secretly carrying out the will of a Sith Lord. But now, the room is much brighter to reflect sunnier times in the galaxy. Now, remember that symbolism because it's going to recur a little later in the episode. And this is our big cameo for the episode, Ki-Adi-Mundi, who served on the Jedi Council in The Phantom Menace. Remember, he was the one who assured us that the Sith would not be a problem.
The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
And here we see the same sort of denial from him.
An apprentice who doesn't know their master. It's absurd.
And it's a neat detail that his hair is brown and not white, like when he served on the council in the prequels over 100 years later. Fun fact though, he is a Saurian, and because of his species' low birth rate, he was one of the few Jedi who was allowed to have a family. He had 4 wives and 7 daughters. So they're analyzing May's fighting technique.
Her emotions guide her every choice in combat.
So this is why they don't believe that she was trained by a Jedi. The Jedi try to remove all of their emotions so they just become extensions of the Force. Basically, your emotions cloud your connection to the Force. But the Sith use their own emotions and their own passion to bend the Force to their will. That's why the Sith throw the Force out of balance, because they themselves are imbalanced. Now, because of May's use of emotion and her Force abilities, they believe that she could not have been trained by a Jedi, but they are afraid of of a splinter order.
Could this be a splinter order?
Now that's interesting because, like I said last week, there were once multiple Force religions throughout the galaxy. During the High Republic Phase 1, the Jedi even celebrated these other Force religions. But following the events of the Nihil attacks, the Jedi seem to be a lot more guarded against other sects. For instance, last week we learned that they don't want other Force users training children. They implied that it's even against Republic law for other Force religions to train children.
The Republic lost.
Randolf is not a part of the Republic.
It's like the Jedi are trying to choke off any competitors before they can grow. Now, we also learned here that the Jedi were actually stationed on Brendok, the same planet as the Witch Coven, which makes me think that they were sent there just to keep tabs on this other group. Jedi were probably posted all around the galaxy just to make sure that no other Force users gained too much power or grew too large. And then Vernestra Rwoh enters. Now, I talked a lot about her at length in our episode 1 breakdown, so I'm not going to go too far into her backstory. But basically, she was a Jedi in the High Republic books and one of the youngest ever given knighthood. Now, she used to be very cavalier, but then she suffered a lot of trauma. Both her master and her Padawan died in the fall of Starlight Beacon. So that could explain why now she has kind of a harder edge to her and why she's so much more guarded. She doesn't want to inform the council because then they would have to inform the Senate, stirring up their political rivals. Now, in the books, we see that some senators are pressing for a standard Republic military to replace the Jedi as peacekeepers. And by the time of the prequels, the Jedi have basically become subservient to the will of the Senate. So what we're seeing here is a kind of in-between period. Jedi like Vernestra remember when the council was independent from the Senate and she wants to keep it that way. Now this will eventually be reflected in Yoda's attitude when he kept the Sith a secret from the rest of the galaxy.
If informed the Senate is, multiply, our adversaries will.
And this line,
A plan that is difficult to see. Some sort of shift. Something to tip the scales.
is also very similar to what Yoda said about the Sith during the Clone Wars.
The shroud of the dark side has fallen.
Vernestra also insists that a Jedi taught May,
You think a Jedi taught her?
Even a hologram can tell me that.
because she cannot even conceive that the Sith are still around. But there is a slight hint in these holos. Notice how when she shows that 2 Jedi are dead, their holograms turn from Jedi blue to Sith red. Now before Sol leaves, Vernestra lays a guilt trip on him about Brendok.
Why didn't you tell me there was a chance this poor girl survived?
Kind of similar to how T'Challa gave his dad a hard time about leaving behind baby Killmonger.
Why didn't you bring the boy home?
So then we go to Khofar, where Qimir sure is acting like a doofus.
Can you use their saber if you disarm them?
So this is the scene where it becomes so obvious that he is the master that I really hope this is all a misdirect.
You know how he is. He collects people.
I mean, then again, there would be a neat symmetry here, because Yoda pretended to be a doofus when he first met Luke.
Hey, get out of there!
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
It's like he's leading May on, trying to find out what she thinks of this secret mission that he's put her on.
You have to kill the Wookiee without a weapon.
And then she asks him what kind of deal he made with the Master, and he says,
I just owe him.
And this could be true. The person we're saying is the Master could actually just be the apprentice who served under Darth Plagueis the Wise, you know, Palpatine's former master. So Qimir could be saying that he owes his master, Plagueis, and not the same master that May is referring to. Qimir goes on to remind the audience that May has never even seen her master's face.
I've never seen his face. Have you?
You know I haven't.
And then he kind of leads her on, addressing the connection between Sol and Osha. This could be because he's trying to subtly remind her that Osha chose the Jedi over her sister, which would then drive a wedge between her and her family, further pulling her toward the dark side of the Force. Osha is sad about not being able to stay with the Jedi, but she's ready to move on with their life until Sol pulls an Ozzy Altobello.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
But Sol isn't being altruistic here. He wants to use Osha to get to May. See, for years, Osha has bought into the belief that May set the fire that killed her entire family. Now, we know that's clearly not true. The Coven members were dead, but they were obviously not burned in a fire. Like, guys, this is Star Wars. This is what you look like when you die in a fire. We know that Sol is holding something back because later on in the episode, he says,
Once we get May safely to the ship, I'll explain everything.
Which is usually a way of telling the audience this mentor character will never live to tell the younger character the truth about their past.
The next time we see each other, we'll talk about your mother.
Now I bring all this up because of Mike's theory about May and Osha being the same person. Imagine if Osha's body actually died, but then her Force spirit went into May's body, kind of like Palpatine preserving his spirit after his death in Return of the Jedi. But Osha's personality would have been dominant in May's body for years until May started to force project her consciousness across the galaxy, similar to what Luke did at the end of Last Jedi. This is even hinted at later when Yord says,
"Maybe Sol brought you here to face her, but maybe he brought you here to face yourself."
And we still haven't seen the part of Osha's forehead where May has her marking, so that could be the big twist reveal of this show. And the Qimir twist that he's secretly the master could be like the easy setup for that. Like, hey, that was the easy to solve twist that lets us think we know what's going to happen, and then bam, they'll hit us with an even bigger revelation. Sol says that Osha needs to confront May, and maybe he's saying this so he can reconcile her two identities, even saying,
"There is still good in her."
Which, you know, we've heard in Star Wars before.
I know there is good in you.
There's good in him.
Now, the idea of Luke seeing good in Vader spoke to the Star Wars fascination with duality. The Force has a light and a dark side. We're in a battle between good and evil. And all of these forces can exist within one person fighting for control. And that's why the ACOLYTE is so interested in exploring this duality in the Force through the twins May and Osha. We even see it in this episode, with May wearing dark colors and Osha being made to wear a light color jumpsuit. So the Jedi Away mission includes another prequel favorite, Plo Koon. Now he died here in Revenge of the Sith, and in the Clone Wars we learned that he was the Jedi who brought Ahsoka Tano into the Order. But guys, Basil is the plushie that I want. The look of the little rat tracker seems to be based on Snoopy's outfit when he flew his stopwitch camel against the Red Baron, you know, with aviator cap and goggles. Osha talks all through the presentation just like she talked during her mom's lessons when she was a kid.
Is he or they with us?
Pay attention. Stop distracting me.
And guys, look at this shot. They filmed this in Brecon Beacons National Park in Wales. And this is what it looks like when you get out of the volume and film on location. I will say though that the rest of the forest in the episode looks like it's all on a set. Yord says,
Although most Padawans want to learn Shariwok, I took it upon myself to learn a language a little more nuanced.
Which is the language of the Wookiees.
Man, Yord is such a hipster. He didn't want to learn Wookiee because everybody else was doing it.
Yeah, and you know, the internet loves to hate this guy. He's such a tool.
You're gonna need to hand that blaster over.
But most of the online hate is because the actor who plays him, Charlie Barnett, got his Skywalkers mixed up in an interview.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
Actually, it was Luke Skywalker who blew up the Death Star. Anakin was his father, and in the Battle of Naboo, he
Yeah, I know. We all know, but I don't care if the actors know. Like, do you think that Ricardo Montalban had to watch every episode of Classic Trek to play Khan? They're actors.
Not soldiers.
I also think it's interesting that they find a clearing filled with these caterpillar cocoons that are going to turn into moths. Now, this could be implying a larger theme of change and metamorphosis. Osha then sets off a chain of events that leads to a caterpillar's death. And remember, last episode we saw how her childhood curiosity of the Jedi was described as pulling on a thread in the Force.
If you want to pull the thread, then pull it.
And this made Osha blame herself for that thread being pulled and for her entire family dying.
But she thinks that May set the fire.
Yes, but she's the one who told May she was leaving, and then May then started the fire to keep her from leaving. Now the incident with this caterpillar is traumatic because it reminds her of that childhood trauma. Now when she tells Jecki this, the Padawan reminds her of the Jedi philosophy regarding the loss of life.
We're not defined by what we lose. We're defined by what we survive.
Which echoes the terrible advice that Yoda gave Anakin about seeing visions of Padme's death.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force.
Both Osha and Anakin ended up leaving the Jedi Order because they couldn't let go of their attachments to their family. Now I pointed this out last week, but the Covenant's philosophy of not disturbing the natural order of the Force is very similar to Phase 2's Path of the Open Hand. Now this was a Force cult who believed that when the Jedi use the Force, they are somehow hurting the Force. So Qimir continues to act exactly like the Master in disguise, getting May to explain the final lesson to him and the audience.
He says, your final lesson is when you teach yourself. You will kill a Jedi without a weapon.
And again, Darth Vader did this exact thing, but he not only killed the Jedi Karath, but to do this, he destroyed an entire structure, killing dozens or even hundreds of people. And the way that Qimir talks to her seems like he's a teacher who's trying to encourage his students.
It's not impossible. You know that.
And when he realizes that May isn't worried about prison because she'll snitch on the Master, he warns,
He'll kill you.
I mean, guys, he's basically admitting that he's the master.
Oh my god, I knew it!
Then the sun begins to set, which I gotta think a Star Wars fanatic like Leslie Headland did on purpose.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, Star Wars is very big on using sunsets for symbolic reasons. Luke looks at the binary sunset and dreams of living a life somewhere else. In that case, the sunset was a symbol of finality, like he had just finished living one more lousy day on Tatooine. The climax on Cloud City of Empire Strikes Back also took place at sunset to show how the Empire was winning and eclipsing the light of the rebellion. And in The Phantom Menace, the sun is setting during Anakin's test and it's already nighttime when he is denied entry into the Order, foreshadowing how he will eventually be cut off from the Order by the dark side. And of course, sunsets are also featured prominently in Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, The Last Jedi, and then Rise of Skywalker for some reason. And here, the sunset is arriving just as the Sith Lord is about to reveal himself. In fact, it becomes dusk the moment May realizes that Kalnaka has been killed.
He's here.
And outside, God, I love this moment so much, where the Sith like slowly lowers into frame, like the villain in a horror movie.
Like there's a ghost right behind me, isn't there?
Not just any horror movie. It's a reference to the best sci-fi horror flick of all time.
Who's that?
Oh, that's Brianna. She's the living consciousness of a movie given sentience through some dark power that we can't help to understand. Now wait, what's the best sci-fi horror movie of all time?
Obviously it's Alien. It's a Ridley Scott masterpiece. And this is a reference to the first Alien appearance when the xenomorph lowers down behind Brett. The master even kinda has a xenomorph look, like a nearly solid curve without clear eyes. The mouthpiece even kind of resembles teeth. It's chef's kiss.
Oh my god, you're right. I'd never actually realized that. Thank you. And the Jedi response,
what is that?
Is also what Kanan and Ezra said the first time they encountered Darth Vader.
What was that?
After the Sith draws his red saber, the Jedi ignite. Now, notice how they all have green and blue sabers except for this orange saber. Interestingly, in the old Legends continuity, orange sabers were meant to represent balance and were used by gray Jedi. And they might actually be doing something similar in the show Ahsoka, where Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll both used orange sabers.
Are you sure it's not yellow?
Oh, you think it looks yellow?
Well, I mean, I'm colorblind, but the internet says yellow.
I mean, it could be. Yellow sabers were typically used by temple guards or Jedi Sentinels. Now, the Jedi Sentinels were a group who preferred to help out ordinary people instead of dealing with galactic-wide threats. Now, notice how the Master's helmet looks like it was created with kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending by using melted gold. We did see a similar technique used to mend Kylo Ren's helmet in Rise of Skywalker, and I loved how he just dismissed Osha with the flick of a finger after studying her for a long time. I mean, this fight looks so cool, and I cannot believe they ended the episode right there. Now, I think the reason the Master killed Kalnaka is because he wanted to make sure that May ended up killing Sol, especially if it turns out that May and Osha are the same person, because this would mean that May/Osha had to kill the Jedi that she cares for the most. This would sever her final tie to her old life, similar to Kylo Ren having to kill his father in Force Awakens. So the big question is Qimir the Master? It would be a neat reveal, but he's basically our only suspect at this point, unless you want to pick on Vernestra Rwoh. I mean, he did seem to encourage May to walk this path for her final lesson, and he was also the person who tracked down the Wookiee and led May directly to him. Also, he's constantly reminding her of her obligation to the Master.
You need to kill the Wookiee. You made a deal.
Again, guys, I am just loving the mysteries of this show. I have not been this excited for a Star Wars mystery since Rey's Vision and Force Awakens, which I watched many times in slow motion before I even worked in this store breaking down things for all of you. So guys, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, hey, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.